All right,
Chaburah. The more we learn about the Rav, as the year goes on. Family with bad jokes.
By Thursday night, my walls are worn down. Everything is running on fumes. So everything tends to come out. All right, Chaburah. Good evening. So first of all, especially Yashikach Steve, who are our sponsors tonight?
Nechemi Feldman, in honor of the birth of his grandson, Rafal Shlomo.
Rafal Shlomo Mazel Tov. Nechemi on the birth of Rafal Shlomo Mazel Tov. Shlomo Rafal. Shlomo Rafal? Mazel Tov. Mazel Tov. V'shevizochem Yeretz Hashem. To see him grow to Torah, to Chuppah, to Maisim Tovim. Mazel Tov. Who else we got? That was it.
Somebody brought a random bottle of scotch.
Someone brought a random bottle of scotch. Wherever you are.
It wasn't random for them.
He's like our sheer secret Santa. It's incredible. Lahavdil. All right, good. All right, good. Jose, let's. Thursday night. All right, Chana, let's begin. So we are continuing in Miraz Hashem in the PHS. So remember again, it's incredible. I think I say this every time we begin this year. How, although we've been doing this now already for a couple of months, Baruch Hashem, it's incredible how we're still pursuing the same basic goal, which is how to achieve this level of Machsha Tova. How do I get to this level of clarity of thought? And kind of, if we expand it out a little bit, how do I get to this level where I have the ability to be a son to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and not a servant? Remember again, as the Piyajatzna said, both a servant and a son both serve the king. What's the difference? Excellent. The son, right, the servant serves from a distance. The son serves right in front of his father, right in front of the king. So the Piyajatzna says too often in life we just simply we're okay. We just simply resign ourselves to being avadim, to being servants of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When in fact, if we push ourselves a little bit harder, we could try to achieve the level of becoming a ben, becoming a son to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So I will say, so if you remember again, so we began last week, actually towards the end of this year, we began Os Zayin, which is on page 18. So remember again, we're going to pick up on the bottom of page 18 on your handouts today. So if you remember again, in the beginning of Os Zayin, the Piyajatzna was talking about the idea that in this pursuit of Machsha Tova, this pursuit of clarity of thought, of what we call mindfulness, the use of the imagination for spiritual matters, not simply physical ones, the Piyajatzna cautioned us that one shouldn't try to reach too far ahead. Remember again, we spoke about the Machsha of Ruchnius being a ladder, the dream of Yaakov Avinu, and how by that's not an accident that Yaakov Avinu dreams about spirituality as a ladder and not as a ramp, or not even as a staircase. Because a staircase, you could take a couple of stairs at a time. But a ladder, really, no one takes more than one rung at a time out of fear of falling. And that's what spirituality is as well. One step at a time. So the Piyajatzna said, we're talking about very beautiful and lofty things. But it's important to understand that in the pursuit of spiritual loftiness, that we also go ahead and take measured steps forward. Rabbi say, I think everyone encounters this in different ways. Sometimes people who are Bali Tshuva encounter this. Where a person becomes a Baal Tshuva, we should all be Baal Tshuva. But the way we colloquially use the word Baal Tshuva, a person becomes a Baal Tshuva, they taste a little bit of Yiddishkeit, it's incredible. Then what happens? Go wild. And then one day, what happens? Baal Tshuva turns around and says, what did I do over here? Not that I don't love God, I love HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but I took on all of this stuff. I jumped head first in, and I'm sorry?
The rubber band, and then rubber band.
The rubber band
for one
side. Right, the rubber. So you see a lot of implications like this. But the truth is, so even as a Baal Tshuva, we're all Baal Tshuva. I often find, when this happens a lot, Chodesh Elul, right? What happens when Elul comes around? What happens when Elul comes around? Right? It's incredible. What's my mindset? That first blast of the shofar, okay, I'm going to cram 1 year of work into 1 month. Right? I was asleep at the wheel for the last 11 months, 12th month, year. By the way, that is the power of Elul. You can go ahead and uplift an entire year. But what often happens, so the first day I'm going. And then the truth is, by Gimel Elul, I'm suffering already again, Elul burnout. Very common diagnosis. Elul burnout is too much, too fast, too intense. So it sounds counterintuitive because you would think if somebody would ask you, should I take on too much Yiddishkeit? So of course, take on too much and then take on more past that as well. The Chacham says it's not true. I'm sorry, the Piaget says it's not true. Person has to take a measured approach even to spiritual growth. So therefore, the Piaget said, even in this idea over here, let's not start with the goal of constantly having Machsha Tova, constantly having this purity of thought, this mindfulness, this elated level. Let's try to achieve it once. Because the truth is, what the PhD is really driving at is, if you could achieve it once, what does that show? That you could do it. Once I know that I could do it, like in anything else in life, all I need to do in order to be successful is to be successful once. Because once I know the success is achievable, then I have the ability to replicate it. So if you remember again, he was speaking about his discussion with an avrech, with a young man. And you remember again what the young man told him? The young man told him, I'm trying so hard for this Machsha Tova. If only what? You remember from last week? 2 weeks? When did we have shir? Did we shir last week? Yeah. If only what? What did he want? You remember? A little chazara? A picture. He says, I just want to imagine a visual image of God. A kiseh hakavod, right? Maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like as an old man with a long flowing beard. Something just to give me like a focal point. Something just to give me like a point of connection that I could wrap my head around. So this Avrech was complaining to the Piagetsta, but I know that that's Aser. I know that ultimately, again, the Rambam brings down in the Yud Gimel Ikari, in the Yud Gimel Ikari Emuna. One of them is the Rambam says that the Rimon Shalom Eino Dimyon Guf. He has no physicality to him. So how could I imagine a Kadosh Baruch Hu with a body? Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't have a body. How could I imagine the throne of a Kadosh Baruch Hu has a physical throne when Hashem doesn't have a physical throne? So we'll say. So let's pick. So the Piaget, remember again, said this possibly was the chait of the sin of the golden calf. So let's pick up page 19. Page 19. So look what the Piaget does. It's incredible. He says as follows. The Chayvan sheyisod chevrasenuhu shelo legaer v'ligzar stam ala ish asay kach v'kach ki o lo yishma lanu o shiras atzmo lemar sheish lo machshav tov is oros. We'll say page 19. We'll say this is absolutely incredible, and this is why 4 lines down on page 19. So the Piaget says, well, it's actually 2 lines in. We'll start. Kivan sheyisod chevrasenuhu. We'll say what? So remember again. What's the whole point of this sefer? And it's a point every once in a while to reorient ourselves. The whole point of the sefer is actually not what we're doing now, right? The point of the sefer is not to learn the sefer. What's the point of the sefer? The point of the sefer is to organize small chaburas of people who learn together and grow together. The sefer is not an ends. The sefer is the playbook by which you go ahead and structure your small growth groups, we'll call it, small mindfulness groups. So the Piaget says, in these groups, it's important to understand something fundamental. This is incredible. Not everything works the same way for everyone. What like a dramatic idea, right? Crazy, right? Crazy. Not everybody learns the same way. There are multiple intelligences. Not everybody relates to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the same way. I will say, you understand, this was the godless of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. See, before the Baal Shem Tov, so the truth is, it was assumed that there was one avenue of connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that was Torah. Specifically Talmud Torah, which is beautiful if you have the ability to learn. And if you have the head to be able to learn. What happens if I don't? What happens if I don't? So often a Jew is left out in the cold. The Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh came along and said, it's not true. Habe drachim yesh lamakom. There are many pathways to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, many different pathways. And amongst those pathways also is, again, a person could eat l'shem shamayim. A person could make a l'chaim l'shem shamayim. A person could daven, could stay till l'shem shamayim. So the Piaget says it's very important that as we form these chaburas, we recognize that not everything works the same for all people. Not everything works the same for all people. So look what he writes. He says, in spiritual growth, you can't say to someone, okay, just do this and this. What does it mean you just can't say to someone, do this? And this is so incredible, I will say. You know, if a person wants to grow, Shabbos says, think about this just a moment, right? I wake up on the right side of the bed, and I decide, you know what, today is a day of growth. So often what happens, what do? Today's a day of growth. What am I going to do? No, I ask you, what are you going to do? You wake up tomorrow morning, Baruch Hashem, you feel good, you feel rested, you're ready to go. Today is my day of spiritual growth. What are you doing?
No idea.
Make a plan. So excellent. Except that's usually the last thing that people do, right? That's the correct answer. I'll say, but I'm sorry?
If at all.
If at all. In other words, more often than not, what ends up really occurring, is that we jump into things. I'll say more, I'll do more, which is all beautiful. The problem is the Piaget that says true spiritual growth requires a real plan. A real plan. So he says he can't just tell a person, do this, don't do this. He says, because what will happen? Ki o shelo yishma lanu, o shiras atzmo limor, sheish lo machshava tova vis orus ve'eno. Because also what could happen? If it's just one size fits all, right? One size fits all for spirituality. One size fits all. This is what works. Do this. Then either, number one, people won't listen, or number two, they will listen, and it's the wrong fit. And let's say, you know what happens when you wear something that's the wrong fit, right? Anyone, you ever wear a pair of shoes that didn't fit you, right? It's more than uncomfortable. It gives you blisters, this, that. If you wear, and Ruchnius is the same way. Ruchnius has to be a fit. It has to be a fit. So we'll say, if a person goes home tonight and they say, you know what, I'm so inspired by the Piaget, I'm making a Seder Chavrusa in Kabbalah. Don't do it. Right? Don't do it. Right? Don't do it. Not because I'm not capable of understanding it, right? You could go, I'm sure you could Google it and you could find a wonderful. It's because it's not the right fit. It's not where I'm holding. That's not where I need to be in life. There are so many other things that need to get done. So the Piaget says, so it's so important in the realm of spiritual growth to have almost like a custom tailored fit, a custom tailored plan to my life, which I both say is such an incredible idea. Let's just reflect on this for just a moment. Let's say, how many of us have an actual tailored plan for spiritual growth? A tailored plan, right? A person's in business. Often, I would assume a person in business, at least a person who wants to be successful in business, has a growth plan. Right? You gotta have a growth plan. I can't imagine you could be successful in business just living by the seat of your pants. I'll show up in the office. All right, let's see what emails are going to come in, what calls are going to come in. No plan, no vision. I'm just going to take. I don't know. I'm not a businessman, but I would assume that such a model doesn't work. Person wants to be successful in business, they have to have vision. That's the plan. Doesn't mean it can't alter. Yet I will say, how incredible is it that Ruchniya spirituality, which is the most important part of who and what we are, yet so too often we just simply live by the seat of our pants. There's no plan. And what happens in general with anything that you don't have a plan, what happens? Nothing happens. So it's so incredible. So the Piaget's saying over here, there has to be a plan in spiritual growth, and it has to be a custom tailored plan. He says, Ki be'emes, gam kulam rotzim lios tahorei lev u'bnei aliyah. But say, at the end of the day, everyone wants to have purity of heart, and wants to be a ben aliyah. We'll say these are incredible statements. All right, I want taras alev. I want purity of the heart, and I want to be a person who desires growth. Rak she'i efshar lahem le'isalos min rafsham kanizkalel. Clearly, we'll say it's incredible. What's the problem? Everybody wants to be a ben machshava. Everybody wants to be a ben aliyah. What's the problem? It's difficult to extricate myself from the schmutz. And I will say, without a comprehensive plan, I can't really elevate myself from anything. V'chol yisod chavraseinu. I'm saying, isn't this? You read this and you say to yourself, at least I say to myself, you know what? He's right. I don't have a plan. I'll even think about I know what I'm going to do in my day. Right, tomorrow I'm going to learn the daf. I'm going to learn Mesilas Yesharim. Prepare smichas chaver. Miras Hashem news mountain starting Monday night. Miras Hashem b'shah tova mitzlachos. Right, I'm going to. What's the plan? Right? How I know where I am. Do I know even where I want to get to? Do I have a vision of what the destination is? Jerry, go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking that you need a goal before you can make a plan.
Correct. You need a goal. So in other words, do I even know where I want to get to? Right? What does the finish line? Now, the truth is, finish line is not really an accurate statement because there's only one finish line, which is after 120. That's the kever. That's the finish line. But I'm saying, besides that, right? Maybe not what are the finish line, but what are the different stages in the race? Right? What are the different stages? Where do I want to get to next? We think about this. In my ruchnius, where do I want to get to? Now that I know where I want to get to, how do I get there? So the Piagetna says, everyone wants to be Torele. I want purity of heart. I want to be a Ben Ali. I want to be the kind of person who consistently wants to grow. But for some reason, I never get traction. See, he says, why don't we get traction? Because I can't lift myself out of the schmutz. Rabbi say, why can't I lift myself out of the schmutz? It's very simple. Why can't I lift myself out of the schmutz? There's no plan. Rabbi say, it's no different than if your car gets stuck in the mud, right? So again, you could, and the tires are spinning. So you could continue to push on the gas, right? And the same result, or you can make a plan how to get the car out of the mud. But without a plan, the wheels are just going to keep turning. The same thing is in life, right? You could keep doing, you could keep acting. But if there's no plan, I can't extricate myself from where I currently am. So the Piagetna goes on. Therefore, he says, "V'chol yisod chavraseinu hu laharchines hakasef lamakom lemichius hachaberim ad kapos raglei nafsham v'gufam." They both say this is so beautiful. Do you know what the entire purpose? Because they both say it's important. I know that we thought originally we were going to finish the sefer in like a day and a half, right? But and then our goal was to break out into our smaller chaburas. And I both say we're still going to do that. It's a little bit delayed. We're still going to do that. But what's the point of this chabura? And right now we're one big chabura. What's the point? I both say. Look what the Piagetna says. The whole point of the chabura is to lower the shoulder to the lowest point of the lowest member of the chabura and help him get out of there. See, Rabbi says, isn't this incredible? One would think that when you have a peer group that is dedicated to growth, right? You appeal to the highest common denominator, right? The group starts here. I'm here. Lift yourself up. Says the Piagetna, that's not how these groups work. The way our groups work is we figure out where the lowest person is. Okay, lowest person, stand up. I'm just kidding. Right? We figure out where the lowest. I'm not looking at it. Right? We figure out where the lowest person is. Rabbi say, and then what? We all bend our shoulder to lift that person up. Rabbi say that's the power of this chabura. That's Rabbi say. By the way, whoever heard of such a thing like this? You see, Rabbi say this is what Chassidus is. Because unfortunately, what Chassidus often tried to address was a sense of spiritual elitism, which is what happens when Judaism is only about Torah. If you have, again, Talmud Torah, if you have intellectual mental faculties, that's fantastic. So the problem was, what the Baal Shem Tov says, it was creating a certain sense of elitism. So what about everyone else who's not holding? So the Piagetna says, that's not what a Chaburah is. That's not what a Bnai Aliyah Chaburah. Bnai Aliyah says we're a group, and we're all dedicated to going and learning and growing together. But in order to do that, we all have to be able to grow, which means we have to make sure that everyone is poised for growth. How do you ensure that everyone is poised for growth? We start at the lowest common denominator, not at the highest one. We all bend our shoulders in order to support the one who is struggling, in order to lift them up so that they have the ability to succeed as well. Now, both say such an incredibly novel and dramatic way of looking at spiritual growth. We often think that growth starts here. And if you're part of a chabura, the goal of the chabura is to lift you up, to push you forward. No. What it means to be part of a chabura is that we all have a vested interest in each other's spiritual success. But in order for me to be successful, I need the rest of the chabura to understand my struggles, to understand where I'm holding, and then I need the collective power and prowess of the chabura to bend its shoulder and to help lift me up. I've always said that's where growth comes from. Growth does not come from being a spiritual elitist. Growth does not come from going ahead and just aiming high. Growth comes from helping other people become the best version of themselves as well. And sometimes, you know what that requires? Sometimes it requires Yerida. Sometimes it requires you to take a step down in order for someone else to be able to take a step up. Sometimes when someone's stuck in the mud, you have to be willing to get your clothes a little bit dirty to help them get out. Nechemia, please.
So it's a related sort of story. I have a friend of mine who was telling me that they were deciding, he was in charge of a school, and they were deciding they had to hire a first grade Rebbe. And they had many qualified candidates, and decided who to hire. So they went to a certain gadol to decide, and the gadol says, here's how you're going to decide. So you bring the Rebbe into the classroom, the prospective Rebbe, and he asks him to shake each boy's hand. If Rebbe stands upright, shake boy's hand, he's out. If Rebbe bends down a little bit and sits there, he's a possibility. You know when you have your canon, when the Rebbe stoops down to the smallest child, to his level, says, that's your man.
Beautiful, beautiful. By the way, it's a Gemara. The Gemara says, it's actually a beautiful Gemara. The Gemara says, Isisa guchas gachin velachishla. If your wife is short, bend down and speak to her. And it's not just the din in marriage. It's beautiful, beautiful. It's a din of Adam Chavero. You see what I say? The mistake we make in life is often we want people to meet us where we are. Right? I'm on this Ramah, so I'm not getting myself dirty with anyone else. Come and meet me up here. The job of a Yid is you're tall, someone else is short, bend down. Bend down and meet the other person where they are. Now, Bosai, it's so incredible because this whole time, and the Piagetza kind of springs this, on us a good 20 pages into the Sefer, but like this whole time I'm thinking the whole point of this Chaburah is like everybody's going to spur each other to growth, we're all going to lift each other up. That's what ends up happening. But the first step before we lift each other up, higher and higher, is to figure out who's struggling, and how do we help that person raise himself out of the schmutz? How do we get him? I will say, such an incredible yesod. Beautiful. Again, you see it with children, you see it in a marriage, you see it with friendships, and the Piagetza is saying, you see within Klal Yisrael. The job of a Yid is not to live in an ivory tower. And the job of a Yid is not to expect other people to meet you where you are. The job of a Yid is you see someone who's short, so to speak, you see someone who's struggling, who's down, who's low, you meet them where they are. Incredible. So the Piagetza goes on. He says, Lachein, nirena, gam lohem takana ve'itza, eich largan lefi matzavam. Several says this. The Piagetza says, so now, let's get back to our regularly scheduled program over here, right? I will say, so remember again, what's our problem? I'm trying to wrap my head around this thing called Machsha Tova. Clarity of thought, mindfulness, to use my imagination to not just connect with the physical, which is the default use of the imagination, right? Default use of imagination is the physical world because that's what we know. So now what I want to do is I want to untether my imagination from the physical world and use that power of the koach hadin, power of imagination for spirituality as well. So how do I do it? Like, what do I do? Because again, this Avrech, remember again, the young man who was speaking to the Piagetza, he said, I'm ready to do it, but just all I need to do is imagine a physical image of God. Some physical image. But imagining a physical image of God is also, so what should I do? I'll say, watch this. Says the Piagetza, Lachein, ha'ish b'matzav kazeh. Therefore, a person in this matzav, I will say, what's this matzav? This matzav is our matzav. Right? This situation is our situation, meaning, I have an imagination. My imagination is fundamentally and inextricably linked and tethered to the material physical world. All I could imagine are things that are material, physical, and things that I could wrap my head around. And now I want to use my imagination for my ruchnius. How do I do it? Look what he writes. He says, Yismoch es atzmo al harayvid. Look what the Piagetza says about saying. The Piagetza says you could rely on the Ravid. Oh, what a relief. Good. What does the Ravid say? He says, listen to this. Shemeshiv ala Rambam zal perak gimel hilchos shuva halacha zayim v'zel l'shono. Supposed to listen to this. So the Rambam brings down. I'm coming back. I want to quote to you. So the Rambam writes over here, Hilchos Tshuva, Perek Gimel, Halacha Zayin. So listen to this. The Rambam writes as follows. The Rambam says, Chamisha him nikrai minim. There are 5 people now that are considered to be a min. So I will say, we translate like min, apikores, all in the same way. Right? So 5 people are called heretics. So ha'omer, she'ein sham elokah, ve'en lo olamanig, right? That there's no God. No God. Homer Shisha Managaval Him Shtam Yoser. So we'll say first step of a min, someone who doesn't believe in a God. Second step, there is a God, but he's polytheistic. There's more than one God. More than one God. Vayomer Sheyesh Ribon Echad Aval Hushu Guf Ubal Tmuna. The Rambam says the third level of heretic is that there's only one God, but God has a physical form. Or God has an image. Right? Literally again, Aval Shu Guf, either again he has a physical body, Ubal Tmuna, or has an image. The Rambam says such a person is called the heretic. Rabbi say comes along the Ravid, and the Ravid says, listen to the quote. Amar Avram, v'lama kara lazemin. Why does the Rambam call a person who imagines HaKadosh Baruch Hu with an image to be a heretic? The kama gidolun tovim menu halchu bezu machshava lefi mashik ra'u b'mikros feels shem asherah b'divrei ha'agados hamishubashos deos. So the Rebbe says, I don't understand. The Torah itself is filled with anthropomorphism. The Torah itself ascribes physical qualities to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Medrash itself says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu appeared to Klal Yisrael on Yam Suf like a valiant warrior. And he appeared to Klal Yisrael at Har Sinai like a wizened old sage. And therefore, Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim biyad chazaka. We'll say, what happens when you read the words yad chazaka? What happens in your mind? What happens in your mind? Right? What do you see? What do you see? Hayat chazaka. What else am I supposed to see? If I'm not supposed to see that, then why do you use that word? Just don't see it. Just say Hashem took us out of Egypt. So the Rambam says, Rambam, calm down. Calm down. You're calling people heretics, right? First of all, there's nothing more fun than calling another Jew a heretic. Right? Let's be honest, right? The Apikoris, the Shegets, and this, right? So again, right? And the Sfardim also are very, they're able to do it like so much more gusto, right? Ashkenaz, Apikoris, Sfardim, like that. Right? So the Rambam says to the Rambam, calm down. What are you calling you an Apikoris for? So we'll say, so look what the Piazetzna says. The Piazetzna writes, he says, so now listen to this stira, this contradiction between the Rambam and the Ravid, right? So I've got the Rambam saying that Allah Chalamayim, believing that Hashem has some type of physical image is in and of itself a form of heresy. The Ravid says, I don't understand why you're getting all worked up. In other words, the Torah itself uses anthropomorphic representation. The Nevi'im use anthropomorphic representation. So I'll say, look what the Piazetzna writes. He's Valpi Pashat, Kashala Havadas Divrei HaRavid. The truth is, it's difficult to really understand the Ravid. I'll say, why is it difficult to understand the Ravid? Because the Ravid seems to go against the second of the 10 commandments, where the Torah tells us that ultimately, again, we're not supposed to worship any other gods, and we're not supposed to have any images of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Ravid is really hard to understand. The Torah tells us that Hashem tells Klal Yisrael, when I gave you the Torah and the Shekhinah descended upon Har Sinai, you saw no image, and that was by design. You saw no image. So therefore, the Piazetzna says the Ravid can't be saying that a person could actually believe that God has a physical form. Of course not. So what is the Ravid saying? A person knows, everyone knows that Hashem has no physical form, and everyone knows that Hashem has no actual image. Mitzayer lo ezos, kedei shetucha machshavto li'achiz u'liskadel u'lehisrachiv. And I will say, listen to what's happening over here. You see, says the Rambam, it's usher to even imagine God with physical traits. It's usher. And doing so in and of itself is heresy. The Piazetzna says, I don't understand what you're getting all bent out of shape about. There's plenty of anthropomorphic representations of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the case of Mishnah, everybody jumps on the Ravid. What are you talking about? You're not allowed to believe in a physical image of God. So the Piazetzna says, you're right. The Ravid is not telling you to believe in a physical image of God. What is the Ravid telling you? What does the Ravid tell you, says the Piazetzna? That if it helps you in your relationship with Hashem, to be able to imagine something physical that your mind could wrap itself around, that's mutter. Yeah.
I think that in 1967, the Rav lost his wife and another family member, and he writes about it, and he says that it was a very hard period for him, very close to his wife, and he would feel sometimes the hand of God on his shoulder. Now that's a litvak who would say. So everybody has a little bit of that.
Right. Now again, the Rav was saying that, of course, in a poetic fashion. He wasn't saying it, literal. Right. The Yad Hashem. Right. But again, so it's all the same idea. So therefore, again, the Piazetzna is something amazing. The Piazetzna explains that what the Ravid is saying over here is not that one could chas v'shalom believe that Hashem has a physical image or anything physical. but rather if it helps you in your connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to be able to envision something that your mind could wrap itself around, then that is mutar. Then that is mutar. V'kasher yazar lo Hashem v'tischazik machshavto v'tuchal lachshov b'Hashem machshava chazaka u'nekiya v'dimyon nitzutz nevo yiskalalo as hatmuna hatzir gufni azem emeli yispatlu. So obviously the goal is, according to the Ravid, to use the physical image as a stepping stone. Right? Remember again, the goal in our sense of connection, our Machshava Tova, using our imagination, we're going to see that spiritual imagination shouldn't require anything physical in order to work. But sometimes as a stepping stone to reaching this level of Machshava Tova, I need a little bit of physical assistance. I need something. I need something to help me along. So listen to this. He says, therefore, according to the Rav, the Piazetzna writes, person could imagine for themselves at the time of davening, so says the Piazetzna. We'll say essentially, you know what the Piazetzna is saying? So here's the fundamental machlokes, the Rambam and the Ravid. The Rambam says, any imagination of HaKadosh Baruch Hu with any physical aspects, by definition, is asur. The Ravid says, if imagining God with some level of physicality helps you in building relationship, that's fine. As long as what? As long as you know with absolute certainty and clarity that, of course, Hashem has no physical representation. But if it helps you, you can use it. Essentially, I will say, you know what the Piazetzna says? Ideally, it's kedai to paskin like the Rambam. But if you need to rely on the Ravid in order to help you in your spiritual journey, go for it. Go for it. He says, this is incredible. He says, so for a person when he's davening, could imagine for himself the following. He's standing before Hashem, before the throne of Hashem. What? You're standing before a physical kisei hakavod? You're standing before a God who's a physical image? Craziness! V'gam ato chaver hachavraye b'shas hadchak tzir l'cha she'ata omed lifnei kisei kivodo v'ata mispalel u'mevakesh mimenu yisbarach poshet kiben sheboche u'mischanin me'avrei rachim no'alai avi. So says the Piazetzna back to this avrech. If you can't connect, and the only way you could establish connection is by summoning up a physical image, like the Ravid, go for it. Go for it. And if it helps you to envision the kisei hakavod of Hashem, whatever that throne looks like, and it even helps you to imagine a physical image of Hashem, whatever He looks like in your mind, as long as you know with theological certainty that, of course, He does not have a physical form, but this is just the conduit, this is the stepping stone to help you to facilitate, to enable connection, the Piazetzna says, you can rely on the Ravid. You can rely on the Ravid. And a person stands before Hashem and he cries out before Hashem like a son cries out before his father, and he says, Hashem, I can't take being shackled by the physical limitations of life anymore. I can't take the fact that my entire life is governed by the physical, governed by my wants, by my urges, and I'm always ignoring my spirituality. Page 20. V'starta panecha meitanu magor misaviv umihu haish af b'leiv even shelo yimas b'shah shemitzar b'machshavto es hadmus hazos. So I will say, it's absolutely incredible. Says the Piazetzna. Can you imagine? Imagine for a moment that the next time I dive into Hashem for something, I literally view myself as a son in front of my father. I'm throwing myself on my father. And I'm begging him for whatever it is that I need. And I have him, because they're both saying, all of us have a frame of reference with the son and the father. And imagine for a moment, that's the image you conjure up. Says the Piazetzna, who amongst us would not be profoundly moved by being able to daven with such an image in mind? So I will say, this is incredibly important. So what the Piazetzna taught us in this paragraph, I will say, is really two things. Number one, the goal of the Chaburah is not to appeal to the highest common denominator. The goal of the Chaburah is to identify the individual who's holding at the lowest point and for all of us to bend our shoulders in order to be able to lift that person back up. Along those same lines, the Piagetna says, sometimes in the pursuit of Machsha Tova, of becoming a ben aliyah, of becoming a ben to Hashem, you have to take a little bit of a circuitous route of imperfection. Here, this entire time, last couple of shows, we were speaking about the idea of the need to untangle our imagination from physicality, right? Whenever I imagine something, people say, what do I always imagine? I imagine something physical. You ask me to use my imagination for ruchnius? I can't. My imagination is tethered to the physicality. So the Piagetna says, you know what? So use it. Use it. And if as a first step in connection to Hashem, it's helpful for a person to imagine HaKadosh Baruch Hu as a physical being, it's helpful to imagine the Kisei HaKavod as a physical thing, as long as you know with theological certainty that this is imagination. It's not true. It's not true, but it's an imaginatory step that allows me to go ahead and connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Says the Piagetna, that's the Shita of the Ravid, not the Rambam, the Shita of the Ravid. If that's what you need to rely on to get things going, go for it. I will say there's a bigger message that comes out of something like this as well, which is that sometimes the spiritual accomplishment only comes when you stop being a purist. So I say sometimes in matters of spirituality we become purists. And I hear this all the time. I do a lot of arm twisting for things, right? So and let's say whether it's that way, we just started Daf Yomi Meseches Nedarim today, starting a new Zmanos Smichas Chaver. So whenever I speak to someone about it, 9 out of 10 times when a person resists, it's always the same answer. I can't commit. And I will say, there's two things fundamentally wrong in this statement, I can't commit. Number one, I mentioned this last night, no one could commit to anything. Right? No one could commit to anything. You can't make it's delusional to think that you can make long-term commitments to anything. To anything. Just like I can't promise my family how long I'm going to be around. I have no idea. I can't commit to I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So in general in life, you can never make long-term commitments. Well, so the other piece is, it presupposes that in order to accomplish something in life, you have to have complete commitment. Who says? Why can't I just say, all right, I'm in. I'm in. What's going to be next week, 2 weeks? I have no idea. So we'll say, it's this thing, we don't realize that. I think it's subconscious, but we superimpose this purist attitude towards spirituality. If I could do it perfectly, then I'll do it. If I can't do it perfectly, it's not worth doing. Now let's say, newsflash, none of us could do anything perfectly. So if I'm only going to take on things that I could do with absolute pure perfection, I end up doing absolutely nothing. So look what the Piagetna is saying over here. This whole time, what is the Piagetna saying? What's our goal? Our goal is to disentangle the imagination from the physical. And says the Piagetna, what's the first step to do that? What's the first step of doing this? This is so ironic and counterintuitive. What is the first step of disentangling the imagination from the physical? Imagine something physical. What? Yeah. Just, you got to start imagining God. I have to, when I daven, I have to start seeing something in front of me besides the clock, right? I have to just start seeing something. I have to see, who am I davening to? What's the experience? Obviously, my goal is to be able to imagine something that is fully spiritual, not physical. But says the Piagetna, how are you going to get there? So the first step is utilizing imagination. But I can only use my imagination with something physical right now at the point where I'm holding. Piagetna says, go for it. Go for it. Do not be a purist when it comes to spirituality. Do not be a purist, because if you are, you'll accomplish absolutely nothing. Rather, sometimes recognize that in order to move yourself forward, sometimes even have to do things in a very b'diavad fashion. And I will say we'll begin on just 2 lines, then we'll stop for tonight. Oschas. I'm sorry?
Can you pass them like that today? If you do that?
I mean, look, if it's good enough for the Piagetna, it's good enough for us, right? Absolutely. I think what the Piagetna is saying is, this is again. I want to be explicitly clear with the caveat. The caveat is a person has to be theologically explicitly clear. Hashem has no visage, no image. Hashem has no body. Hashem has no physical corporeal being. This is very, because obviously, again, once you get into that, then you really get into apikarsus. So as long as a person is theologically, explicitly clear, then the ability to go ahead and use imagination to accomplish other things ultimately would be permitted. All right, so we'll say, so take a look. I'll just read this line that we're going to stop here for tonight because I think it's a good teaser. The Piaget writes in Oschas, Shnei dvarim nechutzim lanu, shneim chaseim lanu. There are two things that we really need and two things that we're missing. In other words, or to say differently, the two things in life sometimes that we need most are the two things that we're missing most as well. What are the two things? Hisrachvus v'shichlo hamachshava. Shabbos, so literally again, it means mindfulness and clarity of thought. A person has to have mindfulness and clarity of thought. That's one thing. V'gam his orerus v'israkshus. An awakening and inspiration. Awakening and inspiration. So say we'll call it for our purposes right now. We'll condense it to a person needs in life two things. Number one, clarity of thought, and number two, inspiration. Rabbi say, what are the two things that are most often missing and deficient in life? Clarity of thought and inspiration. So right, the two things that I need most to be successful, ultimately are the two things I'm missing. So the Piaget writes, "Be'emesh name." Okay, so we're going to stop over here for tonight. And Mirat Hashem, we'll pick up with this. We'll say just next week, so we don't have a regular share. Next week, we have the great zichus to have Yosef Karduner, who's coming and joining us. Officially, it is our siyum for Maseches Ksuvas, but I also want to point out that this Motzei Shabbos is the yard site of the Piagetzna. This Motzei Shabbos. So we're also going to use next Thursday night, Emirat Hashem, as a hilula, as a way to commemorate the yard site. So it's going to of the Piagetzna as well. So it's going to be the same as Ksuvas and a celebration of the yard site, commemoration of the yard site, and Hakar Satov to the Piagetzna. I'll say that is next Thursday night. I posted it on the chat. I'll repost as well to make you have to make a reservation. It's going to be a beautiful, beautiful Su'udah first, and then Emirat Hashem there's a kumzitz afterwards. You could come to both. You could come to one. I'll say, but it'll be so we won't get to learn Bnei Machsha Emirat Hashem next week. But Emirat Hashem will get to celebrate the Piagetzna together. We'll get to celebrate a short life, but a life that was so impactful, so meaningful, so moving. Abosai, Shkoyach.
Rabbi, anyone can come even if they didn't.
Yes. Again, thank you for that. I was about to say, as much as it's a siyum on Maseches Ksuvas, the only ticket for entry is Jewish. You have to be Jewish. The truth is, or a big sponsor. If you're a big sponsor, even if you're not Jewish, that's okay. We'll take you.
Everybody's about imagination. There's something that